a.m. on, what's the date? Yeah, the 27th between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. You can sign up for a slot. If you want any advice that's particular to you, or you want movement correction about how to perform some of the exercises we'll talk about later. We won't be talking about them today, but we will by that time. So if you want it's basically just in-person coaching. You show up, I'll do it. It's your time, so I'll answer whatever questions you have, or help you move correctly if you guys want. And that's at my house. Okay, so today we're not talking about training, but we're talking about the benefits of it in a certain sense. So we're going to talk about the skeletal and muscle systems in the human body. So I'm not going to be talking about smooth muscle, which is what's in your arteries and your guts and things like that. We're not worried about training those. Those should be fine. We're talking about what's called skeletal muscle when I refer to muscle today. So it's particular to that. First, though, talking about the skeletal. So when a doctor talks about, oh, you're losing bone density, that's bad. Why is that bad? Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's more. Yeah.
What is it?
You're good. You're good. Yep. Yep.
More likely to break bones.
Yeah, more likely to break your bones. Yeah. Yeah. Your joints are also the surfaces of your joints are going to also erode or wear out faster. That kind of thing. Usually, it also coincides with the breakdown of the lubricating tissues, so the collagens and other things that are between the bones, the meniscus, in the knee and things like that. It usually also has a strong correlation. Historically, this was just thought to be like, well, this is just what happens when you get older, get used to it. And to a certain degree, that's true. Obviously, the bone density capabilities of a 20-year-old, the peak bone density capability of a 20-year-old versus a 70-year-old are different, right? But they're not necessarily that significantly different per se, depending on the environment of the individual and the stimulus. A lot of this is stimulus driven. So imagine you're a person that's a typical American. When you're 20 years old, you're probably a lot more active, right? You're doing more things. You might be played sports in high school, things like that. You're also just younger, so you hyper respond to a given stimulus in a positive manner. When you're older, you hyper respond to a given stimulus in a less good manner. Okay? So as you become less active, that appears to be more what's a factor in play with bone degeneration. And this has been evidenced by, we have data now on what happens when a 60-year-old woman trains. Her bone density goes up. She gains muscle mass quite significantly. I know one of the top powerlifters in the world. Her name is Shelley Stettner. You can find her on Instagram. Top powerlifters in her weight and age category, but she's claimed multiple world records. She didn't start training until she was, I believe, 67. Her and I actually started training around the same time. After a little while, I got stronger than her. She's very impressively strong. In her around 70, I believe, she started deadlifting over 300 pounds. And every powerlifting meet that I've seen her deadlift in, she's cleared well over 300 pounds consistently on the deadlift. Also benches in the 130s, 140s, things like that. Very strong woman. She had no history of training. When she began training, she wasn't particularly unhealthy yet, but she could see that she was declining in her late 60s, like would happen to most people. She has put on who knows how much muscle mass at this point. She has put on who knows, I don't have scans, she doesn't either, but what's her risk factor now for breaking a hip in her 70s versus if she hadn't trained? Vastly different. She also eats a very good diet. She's changed her whole lifestyle, right? She actually hired one of the best nutritionists in the world who's taking care of her. I bring all that up to mention that if you talk to certain doctors, they will wrongfully tell you that, oh, you're of a certain age, you can't develop back muscle. You can't develop muscles on your neck to support your neck. You can't develop muscles in your lower back to support your lower back. You can't, your bone density, it's going downhill from here. Nothing, you can't do anything about it, just accept this. That is completely wrong. A lot of doctors think this, a lot of doctors will tell this. There are people in this church who told me that their doctors have told them that. And I've talked to many people that have been told that by doctors. That is a completely false statement. We don't know how old you have to get before you stop adapting to a stimulus, probably because we haven't found it. At all ages, it appears you can adapt. Now, the older you are, the less you can adapt. And what I mean by adapt is you load the human body, it becomes more capable of bearing that load, right? Obviously, a 20-year-old can plateau at a much higher level than a 60 or 70-year-old. But even so, it's very significant what can happen even in advanced age as far as adaptation. So the first point I put down there, dynamic impact. A lot of people think in terms of, I'm going to get in shape when I start running. If you're over 30, it's probably not a good idea. A lot of people start running in middle age and stuff, and they don't last super long because their knees, hips, or back start to give them problems. Running is fine if you're adapted to it and you're really, really lightweight and your skeleton can handle it. The reality is for most of us, once you're past about 20, running really beats up your joints. And that is a product of just Newtonian physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. When you run, you're jumping from one foot to the other, okay? When you, say, do a heavy squat, is there any real acceleration or speed involved in that? No. It's like, it's nothing. Like it's measured in, you're moving a weight, a couple feet over a few seconds versus a jump. And to give you an illustration of this, they've measured the force at the knee specifically on a 2 times body weight squat. So a squat that's heavier than a lot of people can't perform without training. Some can, but most can't, right? Versus someone catching themselves when they stumble. So I'm not talking about jumping off of something. I'm talking about walking and to stumble and to catch yourself. The force to the knee. The force to the knee, if I remember correctly, on the stumble was, I believe, it was 12 to 14 times body weight. Quite significant. It's only momentary, of course, but it's there. 2 times body weight squat, I believe it was 3 to 4 times at peak, which is the reversal. So when you go down, you come back up. That's going to be the peak of the force applied, right? 3 to 4 times body weight maximum. When you run, you pound yourself. You run a mile, you pound each knee 600 times or so. If you do a workout, you squat on those knees 40 times with far less force. This is why we don't worry about the joints. Now, obviously, you have to perform things correctly, given you can harm yourself, but done properly, done correctly, these things actually cause an adaptation that's positive. It's been studied that there will be more fluid in the joints after you train. That's the meniscus of the knee can actually thicken. Obviously, it does more so in younger people than older people. But there are people that train that don't have a meniscus at all. In fact, there are champion powerlifters that have a torn meniscus or no ACL. They adapt to it. They do just fine. Their training looks a little bit different than some others, but it works out okay. And this all speaks to the capability of the body to adapt. Just because you have some injury history or something like that, you hurt your knee in high school, you hurt your hip, you hurt your lower back, doesn't mean you can't do anything. Doesn't mean your body is no longer capable of making progress. It's not the case, okay? And so when we think of wear and tear on the body, we do need to think in terms of what are we actually doing? And so this is why when people tell me, I want to get in shape and go run, I'm like, well, is that really what you want? And the reality of, like we talked about a few weeks ago, or I think it was 2 weeks ago, you're not burning that many calories when you walk or run. You can overeat. Runners can overeat. It's not that hard. You can pound calories and you're not going to outrun it. So don't do it to compensate for a diet. Have a good diet and then have a lifestyle built around it, train properly. Supplements. People have a lot of questions about supplements because we all get ads for them on Facebook and Instagram and TV. Are they any good? Collagen powders are pretty popular right now. In my opinion, no, if you eat a healthy diet. If you're eating meat, you're getting collagens. So eat meat. The other thing is the reality of those powders is normally the human body is meant to consume most of these powders, most of these things like collagens in food. So when you dump a huge load into the gut rapidly, it doesn't all get absorbed because we're not capable of absorbing that much that quickly. It has to be absorbed slowly as it is broken down from being inside of other food products, like meat, right? It travels through the gut slowly, it's broken down slowly. But if you put a few grams of collagen into the gut, most of it's just going to pass through because it's actually not going to get absorbed. The evidence that we have seems to support that, in general, eat a healthy diet. It's just not really particularly needed. Same thing with calcium. Very few people need a calcium supplement. These supplements that are being pushed, that are, and when they're demonstrated to be effective in some studies, it's among populations that eat a crummy diet. You're not going to see someone have a calcium deficiency that's eating a healthy, balanced diet. They don't exist. We didn't have this problem before. We don't have to have it going forward if we eat correctly. That's all it is. So a lot of the people, now I'm not saying don't take supplements and don't take vitamins. There are good ones, we'll get into that a lot of us as Americans should probably take because our food supply actually lacks those things because it's so tainted. Collagen, calcium, not so much. Most herbal supplements, these multi-herbal supplements you see that people are selling, most of them are junk. Some of them can have a place for certain people. It's just usually not much of a useful thing. You're usually making expensive pee. However, they can be used for a specific purpose. So some people do have genuine deficiencies, right? It's going to be dependent on the individual. How do you know? You have to go off your symptoms and your blood work. But just throwing multivitamins at things. I had someone show me their multivitamin from a very expensive company like a month and a half ago. I was like, well, this is what I'm taking. And she went and got it from her pantry and showed it to me. And I looked at the dosages. There's like 20-something things in one pill. How much of anything do you think can be in that pill? It had like 100 milligrams of vitamin C. You should be getting a gram or more of vitamin C. So it had 10% of what she needed at minimum of vitamin C per day. All the other values, a fraction of what your daily, intake should be. Most multivitamins are similar. They're giving you a bunch of stuff, over half of it you don't need, and the stuff that does provide is often in dosages that are insufficient. If you want vitamin C, take a vitamin C pill. And pretty much everyone should take one because unless you're eating like a bunch of oranges or something, our diet is actually fairly deficient in vitamin C. Even if you try to eat a healthy diet, it's hard to get it because it's so depleted. So I take a vitamin C pill every day. The Kirkland ones, they come in there's like 1,000 of them and they're way too big. I really wish they'd cut that out because they don't fit in my drawer. And it lasts like a year or whatever. Yeah, I do recommend you take that. But a multivitamin that has 100 milligrams instead of a gram in it, it doesn't really do anything for you. So real quickly, if anyone wants to write any of these down or whatever, the things that most Americans are deficient in that are good to take. I'll break down the AM and the PM. AM, so in general, by the way that we usually break down when to take things, vitamins in the morning, minerals in the evening. Usually. There can be some nuance to that, but that's usually how it seems to work out well. And by morning, I mean before breakfast, and by evening, I mean after dinner. Vitamin C in the morning. Then you have zinc. We're mostly deficient in zinc. And that's pretty much all you need. There can be other things that are useful to you, but that's all you pretty much need. Evening, magnesium. I like magnesium glycinate, but there are other magnesiums that are useful. Magnesium glycinate has better use for nervous system support and sleep help. In fact, when I started taking it, I was very deficient. This is like 10 years ago now. I was not sleeping, and I had like the best sleep that night I'd had in like many years. Now, it's not like I get that every night now that I'm taking it, because when you're so deficient and broken, it's like you get that little bit and your body goes crazy. I just like passed out that night and woke up feeling very well rested. Anyway, magnesium glycinate. This is when you're going to take your vitamin D, so your D3. Usually for most people that'll be 5,000 IUs, especially around here. That can go down in the summer if you're around the sunlight, but in the winter, probably 5,000 IUs to up to 10,000 IUs, depending. And this is easy to check on blood work, by the way. For me, I just know if I take 5,000 IUs year-round, I look at my blood work, and it looks good. If you're taking vitamin D3, you should always take vitamin K2 in the MK7 formulation. There's two formulations. There's MK4 and MK7. MK4 has a really short half-life, is only active in your body for, I think it's around 2 hours. MK7 is active for many hours.
They're both vitamin D.
K2 is not vitamin D. Yeah, K2, and you look for the MK7. In fact, if you're looking on like Amazon, if you just type in MK7, you'll get it. You don't even need to type in K2. But it is a K2 formulation. The reason that you should do this is because when you take vitamin D orally, you're depleting certain things in your body, and among them are certain things that reduce arterial stiffness. So you can actually encourage the formation of plaque by taking vitamin D3 without K2. So it's also just helpful in general, especially for men. Men tend to get plaque in the arteries. Take your K2. I think every man should take it, whether on it or not, just because it is a mitigating factor. This isn't something that'll happen like, oh, I started taking it and it went away. This is a many years thing, right? But it is protective. Go ahead.
So, did I understand you correctly? If you take vitamin D3, you must also take K2 and MK7.
Correct. But if you're a man, you should probably take MK7 anyway.
By itself?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes. You're not hurting yourself, and it does seem to mitigate just plaque formation in the arteries. But definitely, if you take vitamin D3, you should always take K2 with it. There are some other things that are sort of honorable mentions. A product called Alpha GPC, which is a choline supplement. It's the only orally available choline supplement that seems to be absorbable. If you just buy pure choline powder, you're not going to absorb it. This is a formulation that seems to actually work. Otherwise, it has to be injected. Choline is just used in the brain. It's neurally active, and basically your body like burns through it. The more brain you're using, the more stress in life you have, everything else, the more intellectual your job is during the day, that kind of thing, the more you're going to burn through it. How do you know you need it? You can try it. If you notice anything, stick with it. If you don't, then don't. It doesn't cause any harm to use it. I take it because people, and if anyone that starts strength training or anything like that, barbell training, you should probably take it because heavy lifting actually depletes it very rapidly. Go ahead.
What was that called again?
Alpha GPC.
Alpha GPC.
Yep, spell out Alpha GPC. ALPHA GPC. Yep, and you can get that on Amazon or wherever. Very helpful. Also useful, just if you're experiencing cognitive decline, brain fog, anything like that, it tends to be helpful. I would recommend usually taking that in the evening. You can take it in the morning, but for me it shows the most benefit in the evening, so that's what I usually recommend. Does anybody have any questions about any of their favorite supplements before we move on? Don't be embarrassed. No? Okay. Go ahead.
I think my magnesium has zinc in it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Then that's fine.
just take it in the morning then?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Zinc doesn't matter as much when you take it. I would take that in the evening because it has the magnesium in it.
In the evening?
Yeah, I would move that to the evening. Okay. Magnesium matters a little bit more when you take it. Mm-hmm. Zinc, I'm not aware of it really mattering as much. Some things do matter, some things don't. Zinc, I'm not aware of it mattering, so I would just take it in the evening and be good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to note, zinc is very helpful in the prevention or treatment of COVID, but it only if taken with ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, or quercetin, because that makes it possible for the zinc to actually
do its job. Yeah. Yeah, zinc is an immune supporter, basically. Yeah, I mean, independently, outcomes should be better on zinc if you have COVID or some other illness. It will not be very acutely effective, though, meaning if you start taking it after you're sick, it's like most vitamins, it hasn't built up in the body. So just a quick thing on like illness and disease in general. When you acquire a condition, an illness, your outcome or how well you're going to do is obviously dependent on how you behave in the moment, right? But a lot is also dependent on what you were doing leading up to it. So what were you taking? What was your diet? What were your activity levels? That kind of thing. For example, well, we'll get to this later. We'll get to that later. Never mind. So one mention too, we talked about sex hormones a while ago. One of the main things that testosterone, estrogen, all those things do, they're actually doing a number of things, but one thing that they do is just promote more bone mineral density and more skeletal muscle mass. They also provide joint lubrication, specifically estrogen. This is why women postmenopausal experience bone degeneration and joint pain. It's specifically because of the lack of estrogen. Obviously, a lack of activity also compounds it, and because postmenopausal women tend to have less energy, the sedentary behaviors promote that as well. But just for you doing the same things that you would normally do, you're going to have a harder time preserving bone mineral density for that reason. And so activities that promote bone mineral density and joint health become more important in a postmenopausal context. This even applies to like the fluids in the joints that lubricate them. Once you have less estrogen, you're going to have even less fluid. So everything inside will break down more rapidly because it's less lubricated, that kind of thing. So the saying that a lot of us have in the coaching world, motion is lotion. What we mean by that is these movement in general, not even anything specific, movement in general promotes healing, right? That's why like if you have surgery anymore, all hospitals know this. If you have surgery, you have to get up and walk, like quickly. You have a knee surgery, you wake up, you're walking quickly. Because they've noticed after replacing probably, at this point, millions of knees, the outcomes are just better. Because movement promotes this. A sedentary human body is dying. That's how it works. And if you want to promote healing, if you want to promote all these things, you have to provide a stimulus. The body will fall to the lowest level of the stimulus you provide it. Does that make sense? But it will also tend to rise to the occasion, if done properly, carefully, right? We don't have people jump on a trampoline after knee surgery. But we do have them walk. I had my hernia surgery a couple months ago now. I woke up. As soon as I was lucid enough, I was walking, leaning on a wheelchair and barely moving, but I shuffled around the wing, like within minutes of waking up. When I got home, I walked. More like shuffled. It was very slow. But that's what I did. As soon as I got home and I sat for a while and I was like, all right, let's go for a walk. And I kind of shuffled around the house outside a couple times, and I went back inside and did that a couple times that day. I healed very fast, faster than what most seem to have expected, and faster than a couple other people I know that have had the surgery, probably in large part because I moved. The day after, I went for a few walks. I went basically as far as I could reasonably stand it without creating a bunch of pain. It was uncomfortable, and that's one of the boundaries to be aware of as you learn about your body. The way I like to usually put it is, it's okay to push through discomfort, in fact, generally beneficial. What we don't usually want to do is push through pains, right? So discomfort, that's part of human existence. Welcome to the post-fall world. We all get to experience discomfort. But pain is something that you should be aware of. And it doesn't necessarily mean you should stop. It means you should reevaluate. I've had times where I go to start warming up for a workout, and my knee is in pain. And then after I get going for a while and things warm up, the pain goes away, then I'm fine. It just means evaluate. It doesn't mean I have to stop right now and I'll put everything away and be done for the day. It just means evaluate. Maybe talk to someone else, because we're actually really poor at evaluating things for ourselves, and better at talking to others and helping them evaluate with us. So the motion is lotion applies equally to rehabbing an injury, but also preventing an injury. Again, your likelihood of acquiring an injury, your likelihood of a positive outcome as far as recovering from an injury or illness is dependent on what you were before. This is a great example of this is cancer. Does anyone know what the greatest predictor of your survival of a cancer diagnosis is? Now, this is in general across all cancers. It's more nuanced for specific cancers, but in general, the greatest singular factor. How much muscle mass do you have the day you were diagnosed? Greatest predictor. Why? Because cancer doesn't actually kill people itself necessarily. It's usually you waste away. It interrupts so many systems in the body that they can't treat you long enough because you consume yourself. You can't eat, you lose, or you even sometimes might lose the ability to process foods and other things like that. So how much storage your body has at the time of diagnosis is what is the most important factor. Now, there can be some nuance to that, of course, with specific kinds of cancers, obviously, but like we've all known people that have had cancer. The ones that died typically got to some point where they said, that's enough treatment. I can't take it anymore, or what's the point, because I'm just extending suffering. In many cases, a person that has more muscle mass will be able to continue treatment longer and possibly to the point of reversal. Does that make sense? And also, you respond more positively to treatment because you're in a healthier state, right? Especially chemo. Chemo is killing you and cancer. The idea is that it kills the cancer first. That's basically the bet you're playing. But it does kill you. It's a poison. It's just hopefully poisoning the cancer faster.
So heavier people last longer?
More muscular people live longer. If it's body fat, no. Because body fat is usually a predictor of metabolic disease. So whether it's insulin resistance or something along those lines. And your ability to, when you have metabolic disease of any kind, type 2 or pre-diabetic, anything like that, your ability to just recover and heal is really, really blunted because your body lacks the ability to fundamentally put nutrients into cells. So without that capability, you can't heal. And so the chemo, when you get, say, a chemo treatment, you sit down and you get the IV bag, what do you think happens when you need to recover from that, when you feel horrible the next day? You're just not going to bounce back like someone who lacks metabolic disease. Now, this is in general. You can actually have a lot of body fat. We talked about this before our break, that you can actually have a lot of body fat and not have metabolic disease. This is true of athletes, right? Football players, sumo wrestlers. A lot of them carry a lot of body fat. They have no metabolic disease. They're fine because they train and they're so active. You take the activity away, they retire, and if they don't lose that weight, they all develop metabolic disease. So does that kind of help clarify a little bit? So the stimulus response to resistance training is going to be increased bone density. Your ligaments actually thicken too. Now this is very slow. Ligament growth is it's like 10 or 15% as fast as muscle growth. Ligaments develop very, very slowly. But it's true. Your cartilage density will increase. If you have a torn meniscus, it's not going to heal from training, though. I don't want to misrepresent. If something is torn and broken apart, it doesn't come back together from training, all right? But if you have say a torn meniscus, for example, you'll probably feel better training than not training.
So,
Yeah.
the ligaments.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a ligament, because my ACL isn't torn,
Mm-hmm.
it's stretched.
Uh-huh.
So can that heal and repair since it's not totally
That's a good question.
torn?
I don't know. I would suspect you could recover some of it, but I would suspect not all of it. But I can't say definitively. In the context of training and diet alone, I would suspect you could get better, but never back to where it was. Now, how much is actually probably more dependent on your genetic capabilities and profile, like, and how severely was it stretched.
Right.
But to some degree, probably better. We don't have really great data on that specifically. That's actually a really tough one, but probably. Now, a partial tear of an ACL, that doesn't appear to go back together under normal conditions. There are healing peptides that seem to be able to do this, but under normal just diet and training conditions, probably not. Even among like kids, kid tears an ACL, even a partial tear, it seems to stay. If you have a 30% tear, 20 years later, it'll be a 30% tear.
Okay. And how long can a bone bruise take to heal?
Usually weeks. Yeah, usually many weeks. They're pretty slow. Yeah, usually it takes 6 weeks or more in my experience. Very dependent on the individual. One supplement that can help with that is taurine, 3 to 6 grams per day. All taurine is doing, it doesn't actually help healing, it increases blood flow in the bones.
Okay.
So it's just, because blood flow in the bones is like painfully slow, especially to you right now. But it's very slow, so you're basically increasing the flow of blood through the bones, and this can help promote healing in the bone.
Yeah, I was told it looked like someone took a bat to my leg.
Okay,
My
yeah.
fingers.
Yeah,
Still, like, once in a while, if I move right, I'll feel it.
you'll feel it, yeah. Taurine may help to some degree. It's not like, oh, it's better in a week.
This has been months.
Yeah. It just depends on how severe, right? But taurine should help. That's the main thing that I would rely on to try to help with blood flow through the bone. It actually is well supported to use for like if someone has a broken bone or whatever, like, and it's healing, like all that kind of stuff. It seems to be very effective.
Can I weight train my leg with that?
Yeah, I would actually encourage you to. You're just gonna have to be careful with the load.
I don't know if I should.
Yeah, just nothing dynamic, right? Nothing jumping or no Olympic lifts. But as far as like normal static lifting, I would actually believe it would be beneficial so long as you don't aggravate it. So you don't want to regress the pain that you're experiencing. This is the general guidance of just having an injury and training. You still should try to train around the injury, because if you become sedentary, you're just promoting the injury to take longer to heal. So in general, what we do is we train around it. When you experience any real pain, especially pain that results in a regression in the sense that like a day or two later you're in more severe pain, that's when you know you went too far. So some of it you're gonna have to feel out. I would just remember that the fact that you're moving with any weight is beneficial. How heavy it is in an injured state doesn't actually matter that much until after the injury. To give you like an example, I had a glute tendinopathy, which is really unusual and rare, but hey, I got it. And I couldn't squat or deadlift heavy for 18 months. In fact, there were times that I wondered, like, is my strength career over? Because it just took so stinking long. I went through two coaches during that time that were trying to help me rehab it, and both of them made it worse. I hired the one, he made it worse, I fired him, started getting better, hired the next one, who was actually a doctor of physical therapy from Duke. So I thought, like, cool, we'll be good. And he also was a strength athlete, so he understood my world. He made it worse, like, even faster than the last one. So I got rid of him. And he's a nice guy. We've talked since, we stay in contact. But, like, I got rid of him and just like, all right, I'm going to do my thing. And I think it took 4 months, and it was 100%. I deadlifted 600 pounds like 4 months after firing him, something like that. So probably could have got there a lot faster. We were re-aggravating it. The old coaches they were re-aggravating it. They didn't understand when I was telling them, I can't do this isn't working. So that's the other thing too. If you hire a coach or a personal trainer or anything, their technical capabilities and knowledge is really important, obviously, like, which is by the way, kind of rare to find anymore because the fitness industry is just full of people that want to take advantage of you. However, your ability to personally communicate with them will also be part of what makes them a good fit or not. Because if you can't communicate with them, nothing matters when it pertains to their technical skills. It just doesn't matter because their knowledge will never be applied correctly. Does that help? Hopefully. So point 6, just to reiterate, a healthy diet provides all you need for healthy joint, skeleton, and connective tissues. Diet, sleep, protect your circadian rhythm. Those are going to be fundamental to health. Any supplements you take may be useful, may be helpful, but you're wasting your time if you're eating junk and not sleeping. All right, skeletal muscle. So we'll talk about this a bit. One of the greatest predictors of mortality is your sit to stand test. So they've done studies on this in a clinical setting. Your ability to sit down in a chair, we don't care about sitting, but it's mostly the stand. So you're sitting in a chair, and without using your hands to do anything, how quickly can you stand up? Now, a young person will just do this and take it for granted, but at a certain age, this becomes a challenge. When you lose that, your days are numbered. When it starts getting slow, I'm not talking slow because you're sore because you worked that day or whatever. I'm talking about slow on a Saturday when, you're not sore and beat up, right? Because I sit up slow sometimes too, and I have a lot of muscle mass. I'm talking about, normal baseline levels of discomfort. As that becomes slower due to strength decline and muscle loss, that should be a wake-up call. That is telling you that your body is in decline. That is one of the most significant predictors of when you're going to die. They've worked out some formulas. You can do some Googling on this. It's a really, really accurate predictor. That is probably the number one thing you need to predict or to protect as you age. There's all this other stuff we can talk about, like, we want to be flexible, we want to be this, we want to be that. If you don't have the sit to stand and you're not competent there, it's a big deal. Because that's also when you start losing your independence. That's when you lose the ability to get out of a car and get in and out of a car. That's what, like a lot of older folks, when they lose their driver's license because of a certain age, sometimes it's as much their ability to get in and out of the car as anything else. It's not even necessarily that they can't drive. They can still see, they can still react, but they may lose the ability just to get in and out. And of course, you can imagine how good you get at the gas and brake pedal as you start losing. Because you don't just lose muscle mass, you also lose feeling in your extremities as this process happens. Part of that's the lack of blood flow, and just neuropathy sets in as you age. So sarcopenia, does anyone know what sarcopenia means? Loss of muscle mass. Generally begins more significantly at age 30. Kind of starts happening at age 20 for a lot of us that take a white collar job or something like that. But it really begins at 30 and accelerates at 40, and then it's pretty much just it's actually a pretty linear decline unless you do something about it, obviously, right? I have more muscle mass right now than I ever had in my life, far more than when I was 18 and weighed 135 pounds. So it doesn't have to be that way, but if you follow don't do anything about it, that's kind of how it works. You lose, it's like I can't remember what it is, it's 1 point something, couple percent per year, something along those lines. Now, one thing that is very significant in that, though, are certain life events that reduce your muscle mass. For example, a significant illness. If you were hospitalized and laid in bed for a while, a lot of people report after an event like that, I got back to normal strength, whatever, 6 months later. You might feel like you did, or did you just get used to a new low? In most cases, it's used to a new low. Another one is childbirth. A lot of women who are pregnant, Brenna, listen, don't eat enough meat. You don't need carbs to make a baby. You don't need much of anything other than proteins and all the stuff that a human's made out of. So minerals and proteins. You only need about an extra 300 calories per day, averaged out over the whole pregnancy, and most significantly, you need more protein. If you're not eating protein, your body will get it from somewhere, usually from you. This is why a lot of women report weakness and lack of muscle mass, their body shape changes and all this other stuff. The body shape changes so how many women can have heard this or would have said this in their lives that have had babies? I got back to the weight that I was, but I never looked the same. There's a lot of heads nodding. Do you know why that is? Because fat is twice as big per pound compared to muscle. So yes, you get to the same weight, your composition was different. So unless you did something weight training to get that muscle mass back, because when you're 18 and you probably peaked muscle mass 18 to 20, slowly declined, you had a baby, well, your body went, oh, you're not eating enough protein. Guess what? We're going to get it from somewhere, so we're going to get it from you. And most of our muscle mass is in our lower bodies. So yeah, same weight, but you had more fat, less muscle. So it's distributed very differently. It's going to look very differently. How do you mitigate that? Weight training. And of course, you can mitigate it in the first place by eating more protein. A lot of the cravings women experience are reduced just by eating more meat. And so I wanted to be like, oh, meat's gross. Well, I didn't like it when I was pregnant. I don't know, find some way to dress it up that you like. But it is very needed, especially the iron in red meat. A lot of the cravings, you don't know. If you talk to people in a lot of other countries that have like higher quality food access and don't have access to the junk that we eat, in Japan, like cravings that's not a discussion. In South America, cravings among pregnant women, they just know that they're more hungry. So they just eat more of the same stuff. But like the cravings of like ice cream and pickles or whatever pregnant women like these days, they don't have a term for that. It's not a cultural conversation. But certain countries, as they become increasingly westernized and eat diets that are similar to our own, all of a sudden that becomes part of the cultural conversation. Pregnancy cravings all of a sudden pop up. It's due to diet. So eat your meat. Metabolic implications. So remember I talked probably 3 or 4 weeks ago about a lot of processes in the body are dependent on sort of imbalances and potentiation among electrons, right? Positive and negative charges. Body fat doesn't really potentiate much one way or the other. It's this sort of like neutral thing that hangs around. Muscle mass, on the other hand, is full of negative and positive charges to promote the movement and fluxing of fluids, energy, byproducts, all that other stuff, right? It's very active. We should say it's more metabolically active. What are the implications of this? Type 2 diabetes, which is insulin resistance, is fundamentally a lack of ability to bring nutrients into a cell. When you train cells, when you train your skeletal muscle tissue, which is where most of your insulin receptors are, you're making them more capable of bringing in those nutrients. Furthermore, you get more of them. So your ability to store away glucose becomes greater. This is why having elevated body fat levels are a predictor of how at risk you are of type 2 diabetes. That's why there's a fairly strong correlation. Part of it is just due to not having a place to put nutrients. You've overconsumed, like my ability to handle a lobe of carbs because of the muscle mass I carry. Not that I'm saying everyone should try to get as big as I am. I actually don't really advocate it for most people. But just mentioning that on an extreme, my ability to bring in carbohydrates, for example, and put them somewhere besides on my gut is far elevated compared to what it was many years ago before I had it. So think of that in terms of yourself. It becomes a storage place for that energy. I don't say this to like, hey, get more muscle mass so you can have more ice cream sometimes. Like, that's actually kind of true, but you shouldn't do it for that reason. So in general, there is a point at which, though, more skeletal muscle is beneficial. Generally more is better. Obviously, there are extremes of this, and I'm not talking about like the bodybuilding and stuff where someone orients their entire lifestyle around the acquiring of muscle mass. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. But you can't really have too much. If you'll know if you get to that point. And you can only get to that point if you basically have a full-time job acquiring muscle mass, like a professional athlete may or may not do. So don't worry, you're not in danger. Fear not. Does anybody have any questions? I kind of got to the end of our outline a little early, so we could open up for a little more questions than usual today of how any of this might look or play out.
I just want to mention, generally, and I imagine most of us feel the same way, you're providing us with really valuable information.
Good.
Really interesting information. I think you deserve a round of applause.
Thank you. Just trying to help.
You're just saying that because he helped you build your show.
You want me to do something for you this weekend again? So one dynamic in all of this, I have an extreme case, a client that just signed up. Actually, the most extreme case I've witnessed, and I've never talked to a coach so far who has had this happen either. I had a woman sign up. She's just a couple years older than me, so she's in her later 30s. She's had 2 children, and she ate a vegan diet for a while, and basically had almost no protein for years, including through the birth of one of those boys. So she's more or less wasted away. She's pretty underweight, but even in that underweight state, she has no muscle tissue. Everything's just gone. She's extremely weak. She struggles to put a broomstick overhead, to press a broomstick, which some of you might be like, oh, that's actually a lot of women, by the way. If you don't protect it, you will lose that. You get to the point where basically all you can do is pick up a plate off of an upper cabinet in your kitchen, and that's about it. When that happens, fix it, because you'll lose that too. Anyway, her program has her using like 5-pound dumbbells, right? I'm not going to load her heavy. She can't take it. She's got a long journey ahead of her. Obviously, she's eating a lot of protein now and everything else. I put planks in her program. She misunderstood and thought I meant side planks for some reason. But it wouldn't be a big deal, right? I mean, I think anyone in this room could do side planks, and it would be like, oh, these suck. But I didn't do it actually specifically because she has a neck issue, and there could be kind of a neck strain when you do side planks. But I wouldn't probably worry about anyone in this room becoming injured from doing a side plank. She did side planks and said, like, yeah, that really hurt. She didn't tell me where it hurt, and I was like, okay. But she's like, but I think it'll be fine tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Okay, cool. The next day I found out she had bruises on her side because she tore the muscle on her sides. This is what happens at an extreme, but it should be a cautionary tale. She's in her 30s. She's not 40 yet. A side plank caused muscle tears. They'll heal just fine. She's not going to have a long-term problem at all. But that's how fragile you can become if you don't eat protein, if you don't get your rest, and she was very sedentary. She had basically almost no physical activity and never got outside, which she lives in Arizona, so like she's got year-round sunlight access, so that actually would have been very beneficial. If she'd even just gone for walks, sunlight would have helped, which I'm trying to get her to do now. But she has a very long journey to even get to where she has the strength of a much older woman on average, because she's just so far down that path of her body has wasted away making babies and not having the input that she needs. And I've never heard of someone having that much fragility. So imagine what her tendons and ligaments are like. Imagine what her bone mineral density probably is. So I don't think anyone in this room has gone that far, but be careful. She didn't think this would ever happen to her either. When she got married 8 years ago, she was running daily and lifting weights some as well, doing everything. Seemed totally fine. 8 years later, side planks tore the muscles in her sides.
How long was she on this vegan diet?
About 3 years.
So she wasn't on it when she was running.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on beans, lentils, seeds as a protein source? Not
Yeah.
excluding meat, not excluding
Yeah.
meat,
Yeah.
'cause I love meat.
Yeah. Good. They're okay. They tend to have a less complete profile when it comes. They also lack leucine, which is fundamental to muscle growth. They're okay. They also, for most people, cause some degree of gastric distress, which you generally want to avoid because that's a pro-inflammatory condition. Not that all inflammation is bad, of course. If you destroy inflammation in the body, then you destroy the human body because that's how we heal, right? But I don't eat much of them. Certainly not lentils. Lentils are not good for me personally. But some beans, yeah, in moderation. That's my opinion. Certainly not as a meat substitute for sure, but if it's going to be in foods, yeah. I'm not a fan of having like lentil soup, like a meal that's based around lentils. I don't recommend that just because it's a lower quality protein source, if you will. That makes sense? Do you make lentil soup? Oh, yeah. Wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
For a long time. I don't know why they're looking at me.
Guilty. Yeah. Yeah. And, like if you make chili, just put a lot of meat in it. The beans are fine. They're not going to kill you. But, and not all beans are created equal either. Like soybeans and pinto beans are basically a trash food product. But like black beans and navy beans, kidney beans, those have some good stuff in them. Black beans probably have the most protein, I believe, of those options. But they're still almost, I think they're about 50-50 carbs and protein, and the rest of those options are pretty much all carbs, which carbs are fine. I'm not a low-carb person at all. I'm not into that. But just know what you're getting into. So if you, like, make a soup that's like, oh, it's got black beans in it because those are the highest protein bean, yeah, but it's still, like, 50-50. So either way, put the burger in there. Yeah, Pam.
I know I was late, sorry about that, dead
No.
battery in the car. But could you briefly go over the supplements again, because I kind of missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, not a problem. So most supplements are junk. I did say that. If you have a good diet, you don't really need them for the most part. But I do recommend you take vitamin C in the morning and zinc. And I recommend, because we live in Washington, you take your D3, usually 5,000 IUs. I recommend that in the evening with MK7. Yep. There's basically oral supplementation of D3 increases your risk of plaque formation in the arteries. So you mitigate that with MK7, which is a K2 formulation. The ones that I've seen, typically there's like 500 IUs or maybe 1,000. It's just not going to be enough to do anything in particular. Magnesium glycinate also. I recommend most people take that in the evening after dinner. Did I say much else? Oh, alpha GPC as well. So if it's spelled alpha, ALPHA, GPC in the evening for most people. That's for cognitive support. Choline, it's a choline supplement. Choline is of the foods that we normally eat. It's in eggs most of all, but normal, conventionally farmed grocery store eggs they don't have very much. I do want to give an honorable mention to omega-3 as well. The problem with that is most fish oil supplements are rancid and just junk. If you crack them open, they stink. If you crack them open, they stink. You don't want that in your body because it's going to go rot in your gut and you're not going to get anything out of it. So just find a higher quality brand that seems trustworthy.
Could you get the benefit of that by just eating more fish?
Yes, absolutely.
And you
Yeah.
mentioned last week about creatine.
Yes, creatine. Yeah, most people should take 5 grams of creatine a day. Whether you not, and this isn't based on if you train or not. It has cognitive benefits. It even seems to it doesn't reverse dementia, but it does seem to have a preventative effect. And also, if you have someone that has dementia, seems to benefit from getting some degree of more mental clarity from it. Besides a bunch of other things, it actually helps preserve muscle tissue. Even if you're not training, that catabolic effect of aging is reduced slightly. This isn't some drug you're going to take like, oh, I took creatine and I put on 5 pounds of muscle. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. There were steroids in that. I promise.
How many milligrams of that and what time of day?
Creatine, doesn't matter when you take it, 5 grams per day. Pretty much every creatine supplement you get, it's cheap. It'll be in a tub. It'll have a little scoop. It's never going to be in a pill. You just put that in whatever food. Doesn't matter when you take it. It takes 2 weeks to build up of daily use. So like the acute effects of it are 0. Doesn't do anything for you. It's continuous use. Yeah.
So I've seen like with creatine, people do a loading phase where they're taking more. Like, what's your take on that?
We don't know. We just don't know. I wouldn't bother. It's so cheap though. If you want to, you're not going to hurt yourself doubling it for a week to try to get everything back up. Oh, one thing I want to mention too. If you take creatine, your creatinine levels will go up in your blood. So when you go get your blood work done, your doctor might think that you have a problem with your kidney. Because when they measure eGFR, which is the filtration rate of the liver, it's actually a formula. You can't really measure it. You can measure it, but they have to inject you with an IV with a bunch of things and see how quickly they reduce and all that. I promise, unless you know you've had it done, you haven't had it done unless you like went to a renal specialist and they ordered a special panel. I believe it costs thousands of dollars. You haven't had it done. It's actually hard to check. So they check it based on creatinine. That's based on normal, values of someone that's not supplementing, someone that's not. And creatinine is basically creatine broken down once it's been used, by the way. If your doctor freaks out at you, just tell them, I've been taking creatine, it's going to do that. And they'll be like, oh, okay. A lot of them know this now. 10 years ago, none of them knew this. Now, quite a few people know, quite a few doctors seem to know this. If they're particularly concerned, the way to assess kidney health that's far more superior anyway is with the cystatin C test, CYSTATIN-C. They can order that. Which, by the way, also if you put on any significant amount of muscle mass, your creatinine levels will also look even more trashed, which they're fine. It's just the body doing what it's supposed to do. But increased muscle mass means there's more creatinine being broken down. So when I get my blood work done, for example, I do the cystatin C pretty frequently because the normal eGFR calculation based on creatinine is basically useless to me. Yeah.
Do you get most of these supplements on Amazon
Yeah.
or Costco? Or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think the creatine we get is it's called naked creatine because it's got nothing else in it. But they all work. They're all fine. I think most of the creatine in the world is made in actually some factory in Germany. It's almost all of it's made in one place. It's just the same thing with most of these. They claim that they're from some special source or whatever. There's only a couple factories that make creatine.
Okay.
It's just the way it is. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a brother. He is not eating meat and all that stuff now. He's going through this weird health phase. He's not eating any meat, but he claimed, and he's now eating all organic foods. He's just going on this weird diet. But he says he has more energy than he's ever before. Now,
Yeah.
he's very thin now.
Yeah.
I mean, he used to work out all the time. He had a ton of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's the complete opposite. Can you live that way when you're doing
For a little bit, yeah.
I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, but eventually is it gonna get to him? I mean, he's
Yeah.
in his upper 40s.
There'll be a consequence someday. Yeah. A lot of people report when they go on a vegan diet, carnivore diet, keto diet, any diet, that they feel drastically better, and that's like the data point. What were you eating before that? Were you eating fast food before that? Were you eating like freezer meals before that? Well, yeah, like almost anything you do that just gets you off of like highly processed food, you're going to feel better. Like a vegan diet is better than McDonald's. I'll stand behind that. And I bet you'll feel better. Is it what you should have gone to? No. You're going to live a little longer than McDonald's. I'll give you that. Like, for sure. But it's definitely not the best. That's what I would say. So when people say, oh, I feel better, it's like, well, one, what does your blood work say? Two, well, you reported he lost a lot of muscle mass, so that's a red flag to me.
He was eating, I think he was always eating healthy, because he used to be like really working out, like he
Yeah.
had muscle.
Yeah.
He's a thin guy.
Yeah.
After 2 years not seeing him, and then I didn't realize he was doing this, he looks like my grandpa.
Yeah.
He's that thin.
Yeah.
He obviously doesn't work out as much anymore because he knows
Yeah.
he can't.
And the other thing too is people will tell themselves they feel better. But that's not what kind of gauge is that. But when you look at like rapid muscle loss, so rapid muscle wasting, that's usually a disease state. So yeah, eventually there'll be a price to pay. Like, yeah, you can do it for a while, and I don't know what his lifestyle was before. Maybe he did think he felt pretty good, but
Getting his protein from, kind of like
yeah.
beans or whatever else.
And you can do that. It's just the outcomes are not as good. At least he's trying. The other thing is, every vegan I've ever talked to is like, I'm getting my protein, blah, 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 blah. No, you aren't. Never met one that is. Even people in my world of like lifting weights and stuff. I asked all of them, okay, show me what you eat. And look, I'll break it down. They're getting half the protein I'm getting. And even the protein they're getting is less effective because it's coming from vegetable sources. Now I count the vegetable source protein that I get. It counts, but it's like 10%, if that. It's a very small fraction. The rest is from dairy and meat.
So the fact that he's not working out like he used to is probably a sign that
Yeah.
he knows his body's not.
Yeah, my guess is he probably didn't have the energy for it and probably wasn't recovering very well. He's probably sore a lot. That's usually what happens, and then people kind of fall off that wagon. Yeah. And it can feel good to go from a heavy body weight to a lower body weight, even if it was muscle mass. Like, there are plenty of senses in which if I lost 60 pounds and got back down to 200 pounds, I would walk around easier. I still feel the weight that I carry, even being very muscular. It's not like practical or comfortable in everyday life. I do it because I have reasons and things I want to achieve in the strength world. But in everyday life, carrying this much muscle mass is just useless. It's just, I'm heavier. I can't hike like I used to. I can't do a lot of things the way I used to because I'm just bigger and heavier. So in some ways, I would feel better if I lost weight too. That's the honest truth. Anything else before we close it? All right, cool. Let's pray, close. I'll remind everyone real quick, there's a sign-up sheet. I think only one person signed up so far, which is fine. If anyone wants to come visit my gym on the 27th on a Saturday, the sign-up times are from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., I believe. If you want to stop by, I'll show you how to do any movements correctly. If you have questions that are specific to you about diet or lifestyle or training or anything like that, I'll answer any and all questions. I'll just be available to anyone that wants anything at my house, at my home gym. All right? Cool. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this morning, for our time discussing. I pray that you'd be with Dave as he brings the message this morning. Please bless our time of worship. In your name, amen.